The Ethics Committee is, since it concerns a respondent, in this case a senator, would be an adversarial proceeding. And therefore, that is why the respondent must be given an opportunity to answer, and the respondent can demand a formal proceeding wherein the complainant can be confronted, the witnesses can be confronted. I would repeat my impression, and I'm willing to defer and be corrected by the committee, that the proceedings in the Ethics Committee is adversarial. In fact, the first issue, I do not know if this was discussed by the chair, is the issue of jurisdiction, from what I can gather from my colleague, Senator Montiveros. The first issue is sakop ba ito sa ating jurisdiction, and as correctly pointed out, ito po'y baka on the basis of the complaint is based on acts which were allegedly done prior to the respondent being a senator. Now, so I ask the question: will the determination of the form and substance include this issue, which issue is primordial and should be decided first, even before form and substance is decided? That's my submission to the committee. In other words, hindi ba dapat before urahin natin yung jurisdiction? Because form, wala naman tayong prescribed form dito eh. In fact, a simple letter can be a form of complaint placed under oath. The form is not that difficult. But to me, the more substantial issue is the jurisdiction of the committee, and as correctly pointed out by our chair, will the acts allegedly committed before the respondent became a senator an issue proper before the ethics committee. So I would ask that the jurisdiction issue be resolved first. Because as I will repeat, form is not difficult. Substance would go into the merits. So that is my submission, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Unless there is any reaction from the other members,
I'd like to think that we will have to decide first on the complaint's sufficiency in form and substance, because that's the root of the complaint before we even discuss jurisdiction. Simply because it is the primary consideration that we have to look into before we even consider jurisdiction, Mr. With all due respect.
Yes, with all due respect to Senator Lacson, my esteemed colleague, before we determine the substance, we first determine whether we have jurisdiction to review the substance. Ano ba yung substance? Did she go to bed with, did she commit any unethical practice? Ganyan. But before we go into examining whether there are unethical practices, we should first rule on the jurisdiction. Because in any forum, before you assert that we can investigate you, the prima facie determination is we have jurisdiction, and therefore we will look into the substance of your allegation. Because, Mr. Chairman, if you look at the substance first before jurisdiction, okay, then will we now require the respondent now to present evidence to dispute the substance? No. Because when you're saying substance, the logical inquiry is to inquire into the substance. Now, if I were the respondent, sasabi ko, no, there is no substance to that. I submit, Mr. Chair, that on the basis of those arguments, that we believe that jurisdiction should first be decided. Thank you.
There are specific rules in the Committee on Ethics rules that dictate such. Maybe ask the General Counsel to comment on what so far you have heard.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I would advise the committee to follow the ethics rules very strictly, and in accordance with Section 17, Rule 2, the committee is required to determine for the form and substance of the complaint. And in this case, what you received is a sworn complaint. So for Rule 2, Section 15, it has a very strict procedure that you're required to follow in order to address that complaint, which is different when you get an unsworn or unverified complaint. That's under Rule 3, Section 18. So the point here is that from the time you receive the verified complaint, you have 5 days to determine the form and substance. And that's stated specifically under Section 15 and Section 16. And the question on jurisdiction, on whether those acts relate to those committed when the respondent was already a senator, is under Section 15.
When the respondent is already a senator?
Yes.
Or before she or the respondent
Yes,
is a
so
senator? Yeah.
basically it says that the sworn complaint must state that the respondent engaged in improper conduct which may reflect upon the Senate at any time after he or she has taken his or her oath. And then Section 16 lays out all the requirements to determine form and substance. So
May I know what is required to establish substance?
it's in your rules. It's
Yes.
under Rule 2, Section 16.
Which is?
So that includes, of course, the name and address of the complaint, of the party filing the complaint, so the complainant, the name and position or title of the member of the Senate who's alleged to have violated a law or any rule, and then the nature of the alleged improper conduct or violation of the law or rule, and then a direct statement of the ultimate facts or narration of facts on which the complaint is based. So, and then after that you have to check if it's verified, meaning in this case it was notarized or sworn under oath. But my suggestion is that following Rule 2, in accordance with the ethics rules, this is your determination of the form and substance of the complaint. That means you will also determine if it complies with Section 15, whether it alleges facts that relate to the respondent's conduct after she took her oath of office as senator.
I have no problems with the matter of form. Obviously, we can decide now. The complaint affidavit complies with the requirement of form. What concerns me, given the allegations in the complaint affidavit, is the substance. You know, that will go into a discussion on the allegations in the complaint, which is actually an allegation on the merits. So that is my basic issue. The issue of whether or not, as I would repeat, matter of form, I have no problems. But matter of substance, I do not know that we can go into that without determining the issue of jurisdiction because of the very nature of the complaint, Mr. Chair.
Procedural matter, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I agree with the General Counsel. Section 17 specifically states processing of sworn and verified complaints. After the committee receives a sworn or verified complaint against any member of the Senate, it shall give notice to the respondent that it will determine within 5 days from receipt of the complaint whether the complaint has complied with both in form and in substance with Section 16 of this rule. So even before we discuss the issue of jurisdiction, we'll have to determine first if it complies. If the complaint complies with the sufficiency in form and substance. So I go back to the previous question, Mr. Chairman.
Just one final one question. What does the determination of substance entail? Yeah, Mr. Chairman, what does the determination of substance entail?
Well,
I am, because of the sensitivity of this. What does determination of substance entail?
Mr. Chair, based on the ethics rules, a determination of the form and substance would only entail the committee's actions on the complaint, meaning if it's very specific. Under Rule 2, Section 16, you have to have all of those allegations clearly written in the complaint, meaning the name of the complainant, the narration of facts. Now, if you find that to be insufficient, in accordance with the rules, the committee is required to return it to the complainant in order to give the complainant the opportunity to amend or make corrections and then refile. And then it's also up to the complainant not to refile. But in accordance with your rules, you do not have to give a copy of the complaint to the respondent as well until there's a finding that it is compliant with the form and substance. And I think the wisdom behind this is that you don't want to waste the time of the respondent as well, because for all we know, it might even be dismissed because
Okay,
it does not comply with the form and substance.
what about the publication of the complaint and release of the complaint to media?
We have not done that.
Yeah, I know. We have, not to my knowledge, that has been done. I'm just raising that issue when it gets to determination of
Mr.
substance.
Chairman, the committee will have to decide on that, whether we will hold executive sessions, give...
Certain action, even before that, when we require when we go through the process of determining form of substance and providing, providing a copy when we determine that to the respondent. What are the
Once we determine, then we will give the respondent a copy.
Once we
And ask
determine
the respondent
that there is substance.
that there is substance and that we are going to continue and hear the complaint.
No,
There
when
are
there is
ma- there
substance,
are
we
many
determine
possibilities at this point.
if the committee determines that it is sufficient in form and substance, we now proceed on the issue of jurisdiction, from what I can understand from counsel.
We can. We can.
Clarify, Mr. Chair, that in fact the determination of whether the acts were committed at the time when the respondent was already a senator or in relation to her duties as senator will be determined at the determination of form and substance, because it's a requirement under Rule 2, Section 15.
So jurisdiction is determined.
Sorry,
By
let
the
me
way-
clarify.
By the way, Madam Counsel, may I request that you preface your answers as we would advise the committee this and that, because it is the committee which decides on this thing. Your role as counsel is just to advise the committee, and therefore, just to be clear, that you should preface your statements that is your opinion as counsel being submitted to the committee.
Yes, Senator, I would like to apologize. Everything that I'm saying in this committee meeting is only upon advice. It's up to the committee to decide on everything. That's my role as General Counsel. What I'm trying to clarify here is that there's a very specific provision also in the ethics rules that talks about jurisdiction. And in accordance with that section, it says the jurisdiction of the committee is in relation to all conduct of any senator that might affect their reputation and also the reputation of Senate as an institution. Now, under Rule 2, Section 15, in relation to the form and substance of the complaint, it relates to acts committed by the respondent at the time that, after taking the oath of office, or in relation to their conduct in performance of their office as senator. So my point is that's a separate section from jurisdiction. When the complaint alleges that it relates to the acts of a senator, then that's jurisdiction. But whether upon determination of the form, which you're required to do, which I submit is something that the Ethics Committee is required to do under Section 17, that requires that you look at Section 15, whether the acts alleged in the complaint relate to conduct after oath of office and in relation to the duties of that senator. And it is upon that determination that the Ethics Committee may have the opportunity to give the complaint back to the complainant for amendment if it's not sufficient.
Is it the advice of counsel that the issue of jurisdiction be tackled as part of the determination of the substance of the complaint? Is that the recommendation?
My recommendation, Senator, is that if we follow the rules strictly,
I'm asking for a
it's-
recommendation, yes.
yes, you have to determine form and substance, which requires just looking at the acts, whether they were committed at the time the respondent was already senator. And I
therefore-
think that by relation to the other sections of the rules, it would necessarily entail looking at jurisdiction in a sense, because jurisdiction relates to the conduct of senators.
Okay, now,
So, Senator Drillon, for the record, precisely the reason the chair recognized the general counsel and gave the floor was to give the committee enlightenment on the rules. That is precisely the reason. Now,
because
may-
the record may sound as if he is making a ruling on this issue, so that's why I just recommendatory.
of course not. Yes, the recommendatory.
We all know that's an inaccurate statement, Mr. Chairman.
Wherein the complainant can be confronted, the witnesses can be confronted. I would repeat, my impression, and I'm willing to defer and be corrected by the committee, that the proceedings in the Ethics Committee is adversarial. In fact, the first issue, I do not know if this was discussed by the chair, is the issue of jurisdiction. The Ethics Committee is, since it concerns a respondent, in this case a senator, would be an adversarial proceeding. And therefore, that is why the respondent must be given an opportunity to answer, and the respondent can demand a formal proceeding, from what I can gather from my colleague, Senator Monteveros. The first issue is, sakop ba ito sa ating jurisdiction? And as correctly pointed out, ito po'y baka on the basis of the complaint is based on acts which were allegedly done prior to the respondent being a senator. Now, so natin yung jurisdiction, because form, wala naman tayong prescribed form dito eh. Any, in fact, a simple letter can be a form of complaint placed under oath. The form is not that difficult, but to me, the more substantial issue is the jurisdiction of the committee, and as correctly pointed out by our chair, will be I ask the question, will the determination of the form and substance include this issue, which issue is primordial and should be decided first, even before form and substance is decided? That's my submission to the committee. In other words, hindi ba dapat before